just so tranquil in the countryside.
The first time I drove a Porsche Taycan was in the autumn of 2019. It was a top-of-the-range Turbo S, and I was ambivalent at best. I loved the looks inside and out, and could see how it would be a lovely thing to live with, usual EV caveats aside. But the driving experience left me a little cold. Perhaps I was expecting too much, but for a car that was billed as sporty, it really didn't do it for me. I wanted to like it, but I didn't leave desperate to have another go. Since then, I've driven plenty of other EVs, and I've been intrigued to drive another Taycan, away from the rushed timetable of a launch. Which brings us to this, the other end of the Taycan range.
This time, well, it's nice approaching it with a slightly different mindset and being able to drive it on roads that I know well and spend a little bit more time with it. Live with it, I suppose. This Taycan, by the way, is, well, it's just the Taycan. Some people have been calling it the Taycan rear-wheel drive because it is rear-wheel drive, but Porsche just calls it Taycan.
The first thing to say is that the Taycan starts at £70,690, but is available with two sizes of battery, the standard 79.2 kWh single-decker performance battery and the optional 93.4 kWh double-decker performance battery plus. With the larger option, the WLTP measured range grows from 268 to 301 miles, so it would definitely seem worth the extra £4,000. The bigger battery also lifts power from 321 to 375 brake horsepower, but weight obviously increases too, from 2,050 kilograms to 2,130. We've got the bigger battery. The other big option on this car is the switch from standard steel springs to 3-chamber air suspension. The colour, by the way, is coffee beige metallic.
Cheers. So what is this Taycan like? Well, the first thing I noticed when I got in was the steering, because it's really nice actually. It's accurate, but also it just weights up nicely, and it's quite different actually to the Taycan Turbo S that I drove on the launch. I heard reports of quite a bit of variation between cars on that launch, and this is certainly much better. Whether it's because there's no front motor this time round, I'm not sure, but whatever it is, this is the steering I want.
Just to confuse and complicate matters further, the Taycan's outputs increase to maximums of 469 brake horsepower and 484 pounds-foot of torque with launch control. However, even though the rear-wheel drive car still has the 2-speed gearbox with a shorter first for maximum acceleration, the 0 to 62 mph time of 5.4 seconds, the same with both batteries, is merely brisk rather than neck-snapping.
Although the 0 to 60 is not mind-blowing by any stretch, when you're just driving, you still have that nice electric car punch, the ability to overtake, the ability to get out of a corner quickly. I think it's every bit as quick as you need it to be for not just everyday use, but actually to be enjoyable as well. And I actually quite like the fact that because there's less power and torque, the throttle pedal seems more natural in the way that it reacts. It doesn't feel jerky, it feels slightly smoother and easier to guide the car down a road. One of the things that I didn't really get with the Taycan the first time I drove it was the regenerative braking. The braking in general, I suppose, but particularly the regen. Now, I've driven quite a few more electric cars since then, and I think probably my favourite remains the Polestar 2, and I really enjoyed the one-pedal feel of that. Porsche does something interesting with its regen. It obviously it wants you to still have the accelerator to go and the brake to stop. So the regen comes when you hit the brake pedal, and then only really when you lean on it do you actually put pad to disc. Given that it's actually doing this sort of dual function, I think it's hugely impressive the way they've managed to marry the two up, blend both regen and normal braking into the brake pedal.
I still think that the ability to have more driver interaction with the regen would be nice. Honda's solution of increasing or decreasing it with paddles on the back of the wheel could work well in the Taycan. Anyway, onto the tyres, which are, by modern standards, quite balloon-like, with 45 profile on the rear and 55 profile on the front. And I think they are wonderful.
I actually really like the look of a bit more sidewall, and the ride undoubtedly improves because of having that extra bit of squidge. The roads around here certainly aren't great, and there are bits that I know really well and bits that you almost wince coming up to them because you know you're going to feel the tyre juddering over the broken tarmac. In this, not a bit of it. It really adds quite a bit to the luxurious feeling of this car. So yes, 19-inch rims, bigger sidewalls for the win. Something I think has changed with time is the Porsche electric sound. So I've got it set up on the configurable button here. I'll pop it on and hopefully you'll hear. You can also get it by putting it into Sport Plus. Perhaps I'll put it into Sport Plus for a bit. Again, I feel like this electric sound is something that has improved since I drove that early car. It now seems much more in tune with what the car is actually doing. It's certainly very sci-fi, particularly under braking, that sound. I quite like it. I haven't had it on all the time because I think it can get a little wearing after a while, but it's certainly quite nice. I think when you're in Sport Plus mode, when you want that maximum engagement with the car, it's quite nice to have actually. The ride on those big sidewalls is actually so good that you can just leave it in Sport Plus all the time. Only trouble is then obviously you do deplete the battery rather more, which means you have to go and charge it up a bit more frequently. Talking of which, you join me whilst we're charging. And because this is a battery electric vehicle, obviously we have to talk about charging and about how you should be charging at home and then it makes sense, but if you have to go out and do a longer journey, will the network support you? Will you get there and find that it's not working when you plug in, and is it going to be expensive? Have you got the right subscription? All these things. We talk about the inconvenience an awful lot. And I talk about it an awful lot. But actually, I thought the other day, perhaps we're thinking about it the wrong way. Perhaps we should have more of an adventurous, pioneering spirit. We should be embracing this. No, it might not be as convenient, but perhaps it's more exciting. Perhaps we should get a thrill from being at the cutting edge, finding all these things out. The people I talk to who have EVs, who actually really like finding out what they can do here, there, how it charges more quickly with sort of certain states of battery, all these sorts of things. I spoke to my parents about motoring in the 60s, and it wasn't very convenient back then really. You started out on a journey and cars weren't that reliable and petrol stations weren't sort of dotted around every single corner and open 24 hours. So yes, perhaps we've just got too used to convenience. And perhaps that's a good thing. Perhaps we should be used to convenience. I don't know. I just thought perhaps as enthusiasts we should be excited about the possibility of embracing a new technology at the bleeding edge, at the start. I'm not saying it's the right attitude or the wrong attitude. It's just a thought. Right, 61%. 4.4 miles a minute we're charging at. So hopefully we'll be done soon. We'll get back on the road. It is a lovely interior in this car. It's just very Porsche really, but I like the frameless binnacle. Touchscreens, well, yes, I've said plenty about touchscreens in the past, so I'm not going to focus on that. What I am going to say is heads-up displays. There should be more heads-up displays. As soon as I got into this is a lovely, clearly visible one actually, and they're brilliant because they're sort of the opposite of touchscreens in terms of being distracting. They're just there in your peripheral vision and you don't have to take your eyes off the road to look at them. It's just a quick glance, absolutely where you want it. And yeah, fewer touchscreens please, more heads-up displays. And if you don't like it, just get rid of it. I've got it configured on that button there. Of course, with no front motor, this is not only the lightest Taycan, but also the one with the most 911 lightweight distribution. So what is it like being just rear-wheel drive? Can you feel it? Most of the time, not really. Traction is still astounding on slippery, greasy winter roads, yes, if you find a tight corner, then you can provoke it if you want to, but it's not, certainly doesn't feel sort of wildly untamable with all that instant torque only going to the rear wheels.
The more I drove it, the more I grew to like it, and found the natural rear-wheel drive balance rather enjoyable and predictable, certainly more so than the Turbo S.
The combination of the better steering on this car and probably just the purer feeling of power only going to one axle is, I think it does make it just a bit more enjoyable. It's not rivaling a 911, but maybe something like a Panamera, yeah, you can definitely still obviously feel the weight in this car, lighter though it may be. There's no disguising over 2 tons, even when it's all low down in the car. I criticised the VW ID3 for being unengaging, and driving this, which I think is the first EV I've driven since, really reinforces that, because it's not about the drivetrain. It's about everything else, the steering and the ride and the handling. An EV doesn't have to be aloof like that was.
Dynamically, this is the best electric car that I have driven. Unlike the Taycan Turbo S, it actually ignited a glimmer of hope for the future in terms of driving enjoyment. And as I've said, far from being a disadvantage, I think the comparative lack of power and torque is actually a good thing.
And surely in an electric car with the network as it currently is, you do want the one with the most range. If that also happens to be the cheapest one, it makes it a no-brainer in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.